Thanks so much for joining us today on this edition of ARIRANG News. Live from Seoul, I'm Lee Ji-yoon. Let's get a check of today's headlines. With hopes of turning the page, President Park Geun-hye is expected to announce a cabinet reshuffle this week, possibly today, following last week's nomination of our new prime minister. Under government pressure to spend more on investment and dividends, many Korean companies are increasing their payouts to meet growing demands from shareholders. Greece's left-wing Syriza party wins a historic victory in parliamentary elections, leaving austerity behind and setting up a showdown with international creditors. With this year's policy goals set, President Park Geun-hye is speeding up her office shakeup. She's expected to announce a partial reshuffle of her cabinet as early as today. Our presidential office correspondent Choi Yoo-sun starts us off.
By carrying out a cabinet reshuffle since nominating a new prime minister last Friday, President Park Geun-hye likely hopes to regain public support for economic policies as she enters her third year in office. The president's approval ratings dropped to an all-time low of 30% following allegations of her aides abusing their power and disorder surrounding a document leak from the presidential office. The pending reshuffle, expected to come early this week, will most definitely include a new oceans minister. A ruling party lawmaker close to the president, Lee Ji-yoon, who once practiced maritime law, is widely talked about candidate as his current Busan mayor, Seo Byung-soo. The shakeup could also include the unification and transport ministers, both of whom enter the cabinet after President Park's inauguration. The president has repeatedly spoken about improving inter-Korean ties this year, the 70th anniversary of the division of the two Koreas, and looks set to add momentum to our unification preparation drive. The transport minister could be dismissed after the government was criticized for its investigation into the recent nut rage incident on a Korean Air flight. But the cabinet's economic team, led by Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan, will likely stay put to enforce the president's economic revitalization plan and public pension and labor reforms. As for the presidential chief of staff Kim Ki-chun, some speculate he could resign sooner than later, as both the cabinet and presidential office shakeups are expected to be completed by next month. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, President Park stressed the importance of breaking down barriers and increasing communication within the presidential office at a meeting of her senior secretaries, including 3 appointed last week, and her new special advisors. Referring to public anger about the government's revised tax policy, the president said all the secretaries should come together under the leadership of the new Policy Coordination Secretary to analyze policies and communicate the presidential office's objectives to the public. She then urged her staff to ensure the revised policy doesn't cause the public any more grief than necessary. The president also says she will share with the public the things she and her secretaries discuss about the policy. Are chances fading for inter-Korean talks? With about a month since South Korea made its proposal for inter-Korean talks, North Korea is warning the South to stop challenging the North on its efforts to improve inter-Korean relations. To tell us what's behind all this, here's our Park Ji-won.
North Korea is sending more mixed messages. The National Defense Commission on Sunday warned the South Korean government not to distort or criticize Pyongyang for its approach towards improved inter-Korean relations. It added South Korea could face severe consequences if it continues to challenge North Korea's forward-looking approach, which it said is aimed at strengthening ethnic ties in inter-Korean relations. Pyongyang also criticized the South for allowing civic groups to send anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border and going ahead with an annual joint military exercise with the U.S. this spring. Pyongyang also characterized Seoul's proposals for dialogue and reunions for war-separate families as rhetoric lacking in sincerity. However, up until Saturday, North Korea's state-run Nodongshinmun newspaper has emphasized inter-Korean dialogue and negotiations. Earlier this week, the North has said, as this year marks the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japanese colonial rule, the two Koreas have a duty to use it as an opportunity to boost their relations. Regarding the North's hot and cold approach, experts say Pyongyang is hoping to press Seoul to change its North Korea policies. They add the confrontation will continue until the U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises set for March. Responding to the criticism on Sunday, South Korea's unification ministry called the North's latest threat highly regrettable and urged Pyongyang to accept Seoul's proposal for inter-Korean talks, now almost a month old. And according to reports by Seoul-based Yonhap News on Sunday, South Korean government officials had hopes of resuming inter-Korean dialogue sometime this month. But with the latest threat from the North, they now think the possibility of talks is slim. If the talks don't happen this month, it may be almost impossible for the two Koreas to organize reunions for war-separated families during Lunar New Year's holidays in mid-February. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
After the United States blamed North Korea for hacking Sony Pictures, diplomatic sources in Washington have said the U.S. might be putting Pyongyang back on its list of state sponsors of terrorism. But a new report says the chances of that are slim. Our Connie Kim tells us why.
North Korea is not likely to find itself relisted as a state sponsor of terrorism after a new report out of the U.S. suggests that it would do more harm than good for relations with Pyongyang. The U.S. Congressional Research Service says the move would have little economic impact but would hurt international relations. The report also suggests that the North would take the move as a threat to its two-track policy of nuclear and economic development, raising the possibility of a fourth nuclear test or more long-range missile tests. Diplomatic sources in Washington began talking about the possibility of the North being relisted after the cyber attack on Sony Pictures late last year, which the U.S. blames North Korea for and Pyongyang denies having conducted. According to the report, the U.S. has never put a nation on the terror list for a cyber attack. The report also notes that putting Pyongyang back on the terror list would hamper South Korea's current efforts to improve inter-Korean relations. South Korea recently proposed high-level talks and a round of reunions for war-separated families. North Korea was designated a state sponsor of terrorism in 1987 for bombing a Korean Airlines flight, but was removed from the list by the Bush administration in 2008 for complying with efforts to verify its nuclear program. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And staying with North Korea, its leader, Kim Jong-un, might be making his debut on the international diplomatic stage sooner than expected. South Korean government sources say Kim could attend an international meeting called the Bandung Conference in Indonesia in April. The Indonesian government is expected to invite the leaders of both Koreas to the event. The North's founding leader Kim Il-sung and late leader Kim Jong-il both attended the conference for its 10th anniversary in 1965. Now, the young Kim could do the same, according to the South Korean government sources, considering that he has a long history of doing what his father and his grandfather have done. This follows a report by The Voice of America that the North Korean leader will visit Russia in May for an event marking the 70th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory in World War II. Koreans have gradually become much more adventurous when it comes to trying new beers. And with that, we've seen quite a rise in beer imports in recent years. And with the rising popularity of imported brands, local breweries are busy improving the quality of their beers and trying to expand into overseas markets. Here's our Kim Hyun-bin with this week's Industry Insight.
Many Koreans love a nice cold beer or two after a long day or week in the office. Their choice used to be limited to mostly Korean beer. But now, you can easily find beers from all four corners of the world, even in a regular grocery store, like this. Not too long ago, it wasn't all that common to see imported beers on store shelves in Korea. But in recent years, imports have been swelling. Foreign brands like Asahi, Heineken, and Guinness to name but a few, are stacked high and wide. The imported beer trend started to take off in Korea in the mid-2000s and has been intensifying ever since. Top dog at the moment is Asahi. The Japanese beer has been #1 in the imported beer market in Korea for the last 4 years and continues to widen its base of loyal customers in Korea with its crisp and refreshing taste.
We wanted to differentiate the taste of our beer from our competitors, and I believe that has been appreciated by our customers. We expect sales to keep growing.
Last year, Asahi imported over 26,000 tons of beer into Korea, triple the amount it imported in 2010. Overall, beer imports to Korea topped $100 million in 2014, jumping 24% from the previous year. Korea exported around $73 million of beer, leaving the country with a deficit of almost $38.5 million last year. So why are Koreans increasingly choosing imported brands over old local favorites like Obi, Cass, and Hite?
Korean consumers are going from high alcoholic content beverages to low, so beer sales are increasing across the board. Tastes have broadened too, as more people travel and study abroad, so they become fond of the beers they tried overseas.
Feeling the heat, Korean breweries have been rolling out fresh brands that are quite the departure from their original beers.
In the case of Obi, it released 2 different brands last year and upgraded its premium Obi beer to give it a deeper taste. Local beer companies are also developing new flavors to adapt to the changing tastes of the Korean consumer.
Given the surging number of domestic and foreign brands in Korea, Korean beer makers are looking overseas to make up for their weakening sales at home. Korean breweries exported $4.5 million of beer to Iraq last year, becoming the Middle Eastern country's 3rd largest supplier. Hite's Jinlo, which began exporting to Vietnam in 1966, now ships to some 60 countries. And OB is expanding its overseas markets, including Mongolia, Hong Kong, and Australia. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Well, under government pressure to increase dividend payments, many Korean companies are increasing their payouts. The problem is their corporate performances are not really improving. Our Song Ji-sun has the details.
Among foreign investors, Korean firms have a reputation for holding onto their profits instead of passing them on to shareholders. But those holding shares listed on the Korean bourse are likely to have a pleasant surprise this year. 8 out of 10 companies that have released their dividend plans for 2014 say they increased their payouts by an average of nearly 40% from 2013. They include Hyundai Motor, IT mogul NCSoft, and cigarette producer KT&G. Hyundai Motor raised its dividend payments to $2.8 per share, up 54% from the previous year, despite reporting its worst earnings in 4 years. Its affiliate Kia Motors also raised its dividend payouts by 43%. They are paying between 11% and 13% of their profits as dividend payments to shareholders, but the figures are still low compared to their global rivals, which boast as much as 30% payout ratio. Stock analysts say it is too early to say that paying higher dividends is a new trend among Korean firms, as the recent dividend increases were not based on better earnings, but on government pressure. As part of efforts to increase domestic spending, the government plans to levy an additional tax to manufacturing companies which do not use 80% of their profits in investment, dividend payments, or in wage increases over the next 3 years. The question now is whether Samsung Electronics, which accounts for some 15% of the Korean main bourse's total capitalization, will follow suit. If the tech giant does rev its dividend payouts at some 40%, its dividend payment could easily top $3 billion. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
More Korean companies are also expanding their operations to invest in China, a market filled with new opportunities for industries. And our Shin Se-min tells us more about how much they're contributing and which industries they're targeting in China.
Korean companies' investment in China hit an 8-year high last year thanks to a bilateral free trade deal between the two countries in November that has paved the way for a more open investment environment. The Beijing office of the Korea International Trade Association said Sunday Korean companies invested close to $4 billion in China last year, up nearly 30% from the previous year. The total accounted for some 3.3% of the total foreign direct investment in China, Korea's biggest trading partner, up 0.7 percentage points from a year earlier. The total investment in China by Korean companies as of last year? $60 billion. Companies in the service sector reaped the biggest rewards with over $66 billion, followed by the manufacturing sector with nearly $40 billion. Analysts say the increase in investment can be attributed in part to the Korea-China FTA signed in November, and also because more Korean firms are setting up factories in China due to the slow economic recovery at home. Both of the nation's top two tech firms, Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics, set up factories in China last year, with Samsung pouring some $2.3 billion into building a semiconductor plant. Korean coffee chains have also entered China, a country with a long tea-drinking tradition, and they're expanding fast. There are now over 1,000 branches across China of major Korean coffee chains like Cafe Bene, Tusen Place, and Man Coffee. Kita says the trend of Korean companies tapping into the Chinese market is likely to continue in various fields thanks to growing expectations that the bilateral free trade agreement will bear fruit. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
After it was confirmed that one of the two Japanese hostages held by the Islamic State has been executed, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe once again demanded the group to release Kenji Goto, the second Japanese hostage. Calling the murder of Haruna Yukawa outrageous, Abe confirmed to Japanese broadcaster NHK that the video released over the weekend that shows the decapitated body of the first Japanese victim was authentic. The Japanese leader said saving Mr. Goto's life was now Tokyo's top priority, but he said that Japan will not give in to terrorism. In the latest recording, a voice which the IS claims is Goto's reads a statement saying the Islamic State now demands the release of an Iraqi female prisoner held in Jordan instead of their previous ransom demand. Greece's left-wing Syriza party has claimed a stunning victory in the country's parliamentary elections. Some analysts have called the win a political earthquake for Europe, as the party wants to renegotiate the terms of its EU bailout and wants Greece out of the Eurozone. Kim Ji-yoon reports.
Greece's anti-austerity Syriza party swept to a convincing victory Sunday's snap elections, throwing the country's future in the Eurozone into question. However, it remains unclear whether the party has won enough seats to govern on its own or whether it will have to seek support from other parties. That might not be clear until Monday evening local time or even later, depending on when all the votes are counted. Outgoing Prime Minister Antonia Samaras conceded a matter of hours after exit polls showed an overwhelming win for Syriza.
The Greek people have spoken and we all respect their decision. My conscience is clear. I took over a country on the edge of catastrophe. I had to handle hot coals. Most people said we wouldn't make it, but we did, and we avoided the worst.
Samaras says austerity measures has set the foundation to pull Greece out of its fiscal crisis. But Syriza's win is expected to signal Greece leaving the Eurozone, dropping the euro, and will set up a showdown with Greece's international creditors. Party leader Alexis Tsipra's main campaign pledge was to undo many of the reforms the outgoing government carried out to keep Greece afloat.
Greek people will regain social cohesion and dignity. And the message is that our common future in Europe is not the future of austerity. It's the future of democracy, solidarity and cooperation.
Greece's debt topped $369 billion last year. Its unemployment rate stands at 26%, and a third of the population live under the poverty line. Syriza needs to win a majority of the 300 parliamentary seats to form a government on its own. Kim Ji-yoon, ARIRANG News.
couple of world-famous musicals have finally arrived in Seoul. And our Im Yoon-hee joins us today to tell us more. Hello.
Hello. So people have been waiting a long time for these musicals. So Gone with the Wind and Notre Dame de Paris, they finally touched down in Seoul. Now these two musicals are giving this year's musical scene a strong start. Take a look.
Up in the high bell tower of a 15th century Parisian castle, the beautiful gypsy Esmeralda awaits. She loves the captain of the royal archers, but Quasimodo, the hunchback who rings the tower bells, falls in love with her as well. The story of her doomed love triangle reverberates through time. It's been almost 10 years since the original cast of France's most successful musical, Notre Dame de Paris, has been on the stage together. But they've reassembled for a global tour, and they've chosen to kick it off in Seoul. The internationally acclaimed performance premiered on Korean stages in 2005 and is back for this very special occasion. And on another stage across town, another romantic head-spinning tragedy. Scarlett lives in a war-torn era, but she finds her life further complicated by the pains of an impossible love. The musical, Gone with the Wind, is based on Margaret Mitchell's novel of the same name, and premiered to rave reviews in 2008. The Korean production is set to star Seo-hyun from Girls' Generation as Scarlett, alongside actor Joo Jin-mo as her love interest Rhett Butler.
Oh, so those are some very big names we heard there.
Right, so this musical is actually the musical debut performance for Joo Jin-mo, which is a very exciting. People are anticipating his performance there. But it's not uncommon for these musicals to use A-list actors and musicians as well for them to transfer over to the musical scene. And you know, it's actually very interesting. They're quite successful, and it really shows how multi-talented they are. So you saw in the report also with Gone with the Wind, they're also starring Girls' Generation Seo-hyun, and so another very famous name that is sure to bring a lot of attention.
Okay, well, let's go back to the first musical, Notre Dame de Paris, right?
Exactly.
I vaguely remember seeing it, but then I'm pretty sure a decade is a pretty long time, and much have probably changed, right, about the musical.
Right. So this musical, Notre Dame de Paris, is actually recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as having the most successful first year in all of musical history. So a very popular musical, and it debuted in 2005 around the world. It was very popular, including here in Korea. And so, of course, why change what's already quite successful? And so the director said that he is sticking to the original production, and pretty much everything is the same. They did kind of beef up he said, the contemporary dance a little bit, but other than that, he's excited to show the performance once again.
Okay, I'm glad he decided to do that.
All right, so stick with what's good.
Yep. Thanks for coming in today.
Always a pleasure.
Happy Monday, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Most of the precipitation has cleared up and left us with some fog and patches of mist here and there, and the sky is very clouded up as well, so we'll generally have a dim day today. Now, even after the rain, the temperatures remain mild, and in fact this morning was about 10 degrees higher than what we usually got in the previous years. However, starting tomorrow, we are expecting a cold front coming in from up north, which will bring heavy amounts of snow, up to 20 centimeters down on east coastal regions, as well as drops in our temperatures. Now, there will be ongoing precipitation in certain parts of the regions all throughout the week, so make sure to be prepared with an umbrella depending on where you are. Now to our readings for today. Seoul will peak up to 9 this afternoon, while southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will be warmer at 11 and 14 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up 11 as well. Dokdo hits down to 9, while Namkang drops chilly at 2 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
All right, despite that gloomy weather, please have a great start to your week, and I'll see you right back here at 4 p.m. Korea time for the latest updates.